right, well, we are back in Ephesians, going verse by verse through this incredible book. We have finished the first half, and today we start the second half. Now, I don't know why coaches say this, but coaches, doesn't really matter the sport, tend to say the most important minutes of the game are those minutes right before the end of the first half and those minutes right at the beginning of the second half. Again, I don't know why, but that's what they say, so we're going with that. This is a pivotal juncture in the book of Ephesians, right? Chapters 1 through 3, we saw the gospel just laid out for us like a feast. Course after course just brought out the beautiful blessings, what Jesus has done for us. And chapter 3 then ended with Paul giving a robust prayer for the church in Ephesus, that he wanted them not just to know the truth of Jesus theologically, he wanted them to know the love of Jesus relationally. Like at the end of the day, that's the key to a mature, joy-filled, rooted and grounded life, is knowing Jesus relationally. That's the hinge point of the book. Now, we come out of the locker room today, right? And he's going to shift gears for us to see the inevitable byproducts of all that. That's the next 3 chapters. What happens when the love of Jesus soaks into your heart? What comes out? Now, if you've chatted with me for more than, about 7 minutes over the last few months, you've heard me talk about a show on the History Channel called Alone, right? Any fans of Alone in here? Yeah, assist right here. He got me into it, okay? So I'll credit Ryan for this. Here's the premise of the show of Alone. 10 contestants, they get dropped off in these remote parts of the planet, and they all have their little area that they have to survive in, okay? The longest survivor gets $500,000, okay? So it's kind of a big deal. They try to survive as long as they can. They take 10 tools with them, so they get to choose which tools. So some bring a saw, a tarp, fish hooks. One person brought soap. It's up to them, whatever they want. 10 items, but there's no contact with the outside world, right? No camera crews, no companions, no goats. I don't know what those are. Nothing. Actually, there's goats. They kill goats, actually, to stay alive. But there's no people. It's just alone. You're alone. And at any point, they can tap out. So they got a satellite phone. They can push the easy button, and boom, in swoops this rescue team to extract them out. That would be me on day 2, right? Yeah, I like walls, I like heat, toilet paper, things like that. Okay. But here they go. They set off building their shelter. They set off trying to procure food. They fish, they hunt, they trap, they're foraging. They're doing everything, and without fail, in a matter of weeks, they all start to lose weight rapidly. Like it's bad, okay? It's so bad that people will eat parts of animals that you don't want to see, right? Even types of animals. Like the other day, I'm watching this guy, he roasted leeches, for crying out loud. It gets to that point, right? It is rough. It is so bad that people go in, they pack on 40, 50, sometimes 60 extra pounds in preparation, and then by the end of it, they come out looking like me. Scrawny and bony. It's like they're starving, right? They just can't get enough calories. Sometimes they even have to be medically evac'd out of there because their body mass index gets so low. And you would think, you just watch the torture of this. Okay. It's a game of starvation, right? The number one thing you need on the show is alone. It's food. We okay?
We're okay.
Okay. Goats.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Welcome to the farm if you're new to the well. All right. That's right. We'll keep a focus on the word. Here we go. Number one thing you would think, okay, that's going to take people out is what? It's food, right? But it's not. Wrong, okay? As they're building shelters and they're warding off predators and they're dealing with the weather, the number one thing that takes people out is what? Isolation. It's being alone. They're in there talking to the camera. Here's these rugged outdoorsmen and outdoorswomen, and they're breaking down, weeping like little children, missing their mom. No lie, missing their kids, right? They can't deal with relationally being separated from those they love. And each one of them, every one of them comes out and they talk about how they're not meant to live that way. There's an anguish of being alone. Now, that's an extreme picture, obviously. No one in here is doing that, or I hope you're not. But many of us are functionally living alone. Many of us are starving relationally. We're subsisting on such a low diet of community calories, and we think it's okay. And we don't see the slow drift and the detrimental effects on our health and on the health of the body at large. How many of us are like that, operating in the same level of self-sufficiency? It's often so subtle, right? Like the degrees of which we are detached, or the surface level of community, or the walls that we put up between us and others go undetected, and we wake up and we wonder why we aren't healthy. Where's the breakdown? Where's the breakdown in that Acts 2 picture, right, of the church, life on life, that beautiful picture? Maybe you've been at the well for years. Maybe you're brand new. Wherever you're at, we all need Ephesians 4, 1 through 6 today. So let's check it out. Here we go. Verse 1. I therefore, Paul says, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. So do you hear the massive transition here? Therefore, right? All that follows in chapter 4 through 6 is predicated on chapter 1 through 3. He's been declaring gospel truths. Now he urges gospel action. Okay, so you doers in the room, you've been waiting 10 weeks. Oh, it's go time now, right? Here we go. Here's the actions, the commands, because Paul's shifting gears from the indicative, here's what's true, to the imperative, here's what to do. Now, notice the order. Which comes first, gospel identity or gospel activity? Identity. Yeah, that's right. Identity always precedes our activity. How we live is determined by what we believe. First, the gospel creates an identity, which then compels an activity. Now, once you get that order right, a beautiful thing in the Bible is that you don't just go A to B, you go A to B to back to A. These things are interwoven. The scriptures are constantly going indicative, imperative. Oh, by the way, indicative. So an example, we're going to see it in a few weeks, Ephesians 4:32. Forgive one another. There's the imperative. Just as God in Christ forgave you. There's the indicative that's driving that, right? Okay, cool. Thanks for the linguistic lesson, Tyler. Why does this matter? Because theology matters. Truth affects life. You can't say, all those doctrine people who just are academic, that's great for them. But me, I just want to obey God and love people. That's not going to work. You're not going to obey God and love people unless you rightly understand God first. Okay, this is how we change, church, which is so important. So many of you guys we see in the counseling room, you've been trying to manage your anger or cut out certain idols of your heart or overcome an addiction, and you've been tinkering with your behavior and adjusting things on the outside and taking in self-help or life hacks to try to get better at something, but in the end, the breakdown in your life is because of a breakdown in belief. And we got to go back to the root, who you are in Jesus. See, if there's something in Ephesians 4 through 6 that shows us a symptom in our life that's off, we need to go back to something that we're not seeing or savoring about Jesus that is off first. Does that make sense? That's key. Otherwise, you're going to spin your life on a treadmill trying to change. Identity precedes activity. By the way, when we do this, it shows us the good character of God, right? Like, this relationship reminds us God doesn't just say things because I said so. He doesn't give us arbitrary rules. He's not after empty moral commands. He's designed things for our benefit, and every command is rooted in our good and in his character. Listen to how Elise Fitzpatrick says it. There's a beautiful synergy where God not only tells us what to do, but he also plants within our souls the only motive that will empower God-pleasing compliance, what he's already done for us. Our action has its origin in God's prior action. This is why he goes on to say, I urge you, did you hear it? Verse 1, to what? To walk in a manner worthy of the gospel. In other words, live your life in a way that matches up with the gospel that saved you. Your lifestyle should be showing the supreme worth of the one who's rescued you, right? Like you can't take chapters 1 through 3 and go, yeah, sure, I'll check the Christian box, and then jump into a half-hearted, lukewarm devotion to Jesus. Like that doesn't work. Paul's saying, no. He's everything. He's worth everything. You follow Jesus. It's not now a part of your life. It is your life because grace has thoroughly changed you. It reminds me of Jean Valjean, my favorite classic literature piece, Les Mis. Anybody? Yeah? And, if you don't know the story, basically this character, he's serving a 19-year sentence for prison because he stole bread to feed his widowed sister, I believe it is, right? And so in this kind of hardened prison, he just becomes really calloused and full of hate. He serves the sentence, it's over, and he gets out, and there's a storm coming. He refuges in the home of a bishop. This profoundly kind bishop takes him in, feeds him, gives him all he needs. But Valjean is still that old, self-protected, scared a person. So in the middle of the night, he steals these valuable things, even assaults the bishop, and leaves, only to be, caught by the police, dragged back to the bishop, in that moment, right, he has one trajectory his life is going, back to prison for life. And I don't know if you can picture the scene. Maybe you see Hugh Jackman singing his way through it. Maybe your brain goes back to Liam Neeson playing the role. Some of you didn't even know Liam Neeson played the role. Oh, yes, he did. Before he was hunting down bad guys in every movie, he had acquired a different set of skills that were unique. And here he is playing this, and we see this scene, and it's so moving. The police come in, and they say, he had the audacity to claim, Bishop, that you gave him these things. And the bishop, without hesitation, said, I did. But Valjean, why didn't you also take the candlesticks? And he gives him his last valuable objects. The police leave, and the bishop leans into Valjean, and here's what he says. Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil, but to good. Do not forget, God has rescued you out of darkness. Now go and live for him. And that's the rest of the story, right? Is exactly what we see, a changed man. Love set him free. And we might say that his ensuing life was what? Worthy of the grace that he had been shown. That's our story too, relentless mercy meeting us in our darkest moment so that we might now, in the only appropriate response, show off the worth of that love. What a question. Does our life reflect the worth of Jesus? Have you ever thought about your life that way? The way you spend your time, the way you spend your money, the way you treat people different than you, the way you sing or open the Bible, does it match up with what Jesus has done for you? I think this is a cool point because it shows that Christianity is not a religion, it's a response. Right? We're not trying to do something to get something from God. We're responding to what he's already freely given to us. I think that's why in Galatians 2, Peter gets called out by Paul. I love this, right? He rebukes him and opposes him to his face. So Peter, everything was good, and then some Jews came up from Jerusalem, and Peter gets scared and in fear and self-righteousness pulls back from eating with the Gentiles into his little Jewish holy huddle again, and Paul calls him out. Bro, what are you doing? It's a paraphrase. Let's read it. Galatians 2:14. Here's what he actually says. But when I saw, catch this, their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel. What a phrase. I said to Peter before them all. So you see what he's saying? He's saying, Peter, your actions aren't in line with the gospel, with what you've received from Jesus. Oh, if we could just see that, right? Like the way the word is walk, our whole lifestyle, like every decision, how we structure our weeks, what we read and watch and listen to, how we approach gospel community, all is either declaring the worth of Jesus or the lack of worth of Jesus. Now, Paul's not expecting perfection. This is not a, hey, get yourself together now that you're a Christian, check your baggage at the door, you better not sin. That's not what Paul is saying. The gospel is constantly announcing to us, it is okay to not be okay. Paul's just saying we can't stay there. The cross says the first, but the resurrection says the second. And the hallmark of a Christian is that we're ever changing in our life to match up with Jesus. Okay, well, what does that look like? Well, verse 2, he's going to give us 3 attitudes that it looks like. With all humility, number 1, you want your life to match the gospel. It's got to be marked by humility. Now, modern day, we use humility, I think, for kind of like anyone who's nice or maybe even reserved. Basically, if you're not overly arrogant, like spiking the football when you score touchdowns and dancing and stuff like that. If you don't walk with a swagger, you're humble. But there's so much more to the word than that. In the Greek, it literally means a deep sense of one's littleness, one's moral littleness. Like you understand your need for Jesus and your brokenness apart from him. And not in a way that leads to self-pity. No. Humility is an accurate estimation of yourself with a growing estimation of God. Which, by the way, is the exact opposite of pride, right? An inflated view of yourself and an underestimation of God. Someone who's humble isn't entitled to be the focus of everyone else's care and attention. They're instead looking out for others' interests. That's Philippians 2, 3, and 4, right? In humility, count others more significant than yourselves, which I think where C.S. Lewis gets his famous definition of humility. It's not, thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Right, like this glorious lifting of my eyes off myself and my needs, because I know my needs are being met in the Lord, and so I'm set free to now focus on your needs. That's humility. It's the opposite of what the world prizes, right? Self-promotion, self-protection, self-help, self-care. This is selfless. And in that Philippians 2 passage, it goes on to describe Jesus' attitude of humility, who, being in the very nature God, didn't stay in heaven, but he humbled himself, taking on the very form of a servant, coming down to earth, humiliating, see that? Humiliating himself all the way to the cross for our sake. He put himself under us, which is another part of that definition of the word humility, to lower your rank. This is why never, ever outside the Bible in Roman culture is this word for humility used in a positive way. It was repulsive to Romans. To be servile, to be humble. And Jesus comes in and he turns that word on its head. In fact, he describes his own heart, Matthew 11, I am what? Gentle and lowly. Same word, humble in heart. You want to know me? Gentleness and humility. Humility, number 1. Notice number 2. Gentleness. A meek kindness, especially in correcting or pointing out of flaws. This is the opposite of rough or rude or harsh. So when we see weaknesses in each other, and we do, we're not, as Christians, uncompassionate. We don't say, what the heck? I can't believe you. We don't whiteboard one another's faults in our head, or we don't mic drop our arguments against each other. We don't come at each other with sarcastic jabs or passive-aggressive tones. Gentleness is shown in our dealing with others' faults. We come with a disarming type of kindness that says, hey, I'm for you. That's gentleness. In the healthcare world, many of you work in the healthcare world, there's a lot that's made out of kind of bedside manner, right? So, you could get a nurse or a physician that applies a shot or resets a bone accurately, but awfully, because they do not do it gently, right? They do it roughly. So you can be right and yet wrong because you lack gentleness. That's kind of the idea of this term right here. The application is gentle. Now, I love this word because it doesn't mean weakness. I think when we think of gentle and we think soft, we think they're a pushover, they're a pansy, right? But the word actually means strength under control. Like a parent who cradles their child. They have a big power mismatch that, if handled wrongly, could crush their kid, but they're using it instead to gently care for their kids. So too is Jesus. When he came for us, has all authority in heaven and earth, accurately sees our flaws, could apply that power in total devastation, and yet what? Steps in gently to rescue us out of our sin. What gentleness from Jesus. He isn't trigger happy or abrupt or snide. He's full of deep compassion rather than demanding force. Number 3, the third attitude, patience. Oh, it's a word that just makes you feel convicted saying it, doesn't it? Oh, it's going to be worse. Listen to this. Endurance, self-restraint. This is the worst one. Long-suffering towards people who are aggravating. Oh, yeah, that strikes at your core, right? As you see weaknesses in other people, and you're rubbed by their difficulty and their preferences and the things they do that are irritable, and maybe even their direct sin against you. We see that to be patient is to not expect immediate maturity. It's recognizing someone is in process. By the way, just like you and me, right? That's where patience stems from, is this compassion to be able to see through to the heart of someone else and go, yeah, I understand, me too. Their laziness or their flakiness or their sharp tongue or their cynicism or their emotional immaturity, and you understand that you yourself need that kind of patience from Jesus as well. Now, it doesn't mean we don't talk to people about it. It just means I'm not going to expect immediate change. I'm going to, notice the rest of the verse, bear with you in love. Oh, gosh. What a phrase, right? Expounding patience, to bear with one another. It literally means to stay under the weight. So I think in our human inclination, we want to leave the weight. We want to get out from the weight, right? When we see others' differences and difficulties, we don't want to bear with one another in love. We want to avoid one another in indifference. Do we not? Yeah, that's what's natural. And yet Paul's saying, hey, gospel people who live in a way worthy of the love they've received, stay in the trenches with each other. Now notice this phrase, assumes sin and failures. It assumes hurt and hurt feelings, misunderstandings, and offense. This isn't a utopian view of community. Paul's a realist, and he understands how hard and messy this is going to actually be to walk out this new unity in Jesus. The assumption isn't that we won't sin, it's that we will. And therefore, we're going to have to be gracious towards one another. So it's not a question of if you will experience the mess of Christian community, it's when, right? In all the logistical inconvenience and in all the conflict and hard dynamics, all of those things. Which, by the way, if you're not experiencing some of that in the church, it probably means you're on the fringes. Right? Because when people are actually doing life together in close proximity, and you're speaking the truth in love, and you're confessing sin, and you're encouraging one another, and you're opening your homes, when you're doing that kind of life on life, guess what? Sparks fly. And iron sharpens iron is not a pretty process. It's rough. It's not an easy, sanitary version of Christianity. Bearing with one another isn't convenient, and it's not clean. Oh, but man, it is a really beautiful picture to go, you know what? In your struggles and your weakness, I'm not going anywhere. I won't stop encouraging you. I won't stop listening to you. I won't stop texting you or praying for you. I'm not bailing any more than Jesus hasn't bailed on us. I don't know where ground zero is for you on this. Maybe it's your GC. Maybe it's a pastor. Or maybe someone else in the church that you feel like has disappointed you or wronged you. Maybe ground zero for you is in your home, your marriage, or your kids, or your roommate, or an aging parent that you're having to take care of. Where it would be easy to be irritated and frustrated and exasperated, and God is saying clearly today, bear with them in love. Don't insulate yourself. Don't alienate yourself. Don't retaliate, but no, move towards them in love. That is the key in all those three attributes, in love. Aha, there's our driving force. Love is what will motivate patience and gentleness and humility. Like, we're not just putting up with one another with a grimace on our face, like, oh, I guess I have to. No, it's genuine. I care about you. I'm dedicating myself to your good. Well, Tyler, they're not loving me in that kind of humble, gentle, patient kind of way. Feels kind of one-sided. Right. If it wasn't, it'd be easy. This is why Jesus says in Luke 6, check this out, verse 32, what credit is it to you if you love those who love you? If you do good to those who do good to you. Even sinners do that, right? He goes on in that passage to say, give without expecting to receive. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who abuse you. Bless those who curse you. Be kind to those who are ungrateful. For this is how merciful God is to you. So check this out. Where we are not patient, or we are not gentle, where we are not humble, there is underneath all that somewhere a lack of love. Like, we just have to be honest with ourselves. At some level, I don't care enough about them. And I need the Lord's help to change me. Isn't it interesting where Paul goes today in the first evidence of a gospel-changed life? Love. Love one another. Jesus in John 13 said, on the eve of the cross, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You are to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. There's the fruit. There's the byproduct of a changed life. If you have love for one another. Okay, that's where a life worthy of the gospel starts. What's the target? Well, the target is verse 3. Look at this. Eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There's our target. Why are we humble and patient, gentle towards one another, bearing with one another in love? Why? For the sake of eagerly maintaining unity. Now notice he says, what? Maintain. We're not creating unity, right? We're not producing unity. Jesus has already done that. That was chapter 2, right? Where he overcame in the cross our hostility and division, whether it was ethnically, whether it was politically, gender, you name it. Anything that we could be divided on, he created one new man through the cross, all with equal access to God. He produced that unity. Now he's saying preserve it. Diligently protect it. Fight with every ounce in you to preserve what I purchase. That's what Jesus is saying. Because while positionally we are one, we must relationally stay one. Now, everyone in the room who's married knows that dynamic is different, right? Do weddings all the time. Did one a few weeks ago. Declare legally in that moment, you are now one. Name change, boom. They're one, positionally, right? But any guy who's been married longer than, 2 days knows that unity has to be cultivated, right? Doesn't just magically stay there. You don't just kind of stumble into staying unified. That takes constant, active, eager effort. Or else in 2 years, 10 years, 40 years, you wake up and what? You got roommates. They might stay in the same house, have the same name, same bank account, but yet there's cold, bitter distance between them. Functionally, there's no unity. So Paul's saying the same. You must eagerly strive to maintain unity. Just as you would maintain a car or maintain your house or maintain a garden or your body, maintain. Without active care, it will break down. A good word for this is keep. Keep it strong. Then in the Greek, maintain has this idea of a soldier guarding something from being stolen, okay? Which is a great image because unity absolutely can be stolen. One, by our own selfishness. The drift is away from unity constantly, right? Those cracks in the foundation erode over time. It takes proactive work, but also it takes proactive work because there's another one who's giving active effort to destroy that unity. Satan hates the oneness of your marriage, of our GCs, of your friendships, of your home. It smacks of what Jesus done on the cross, and he hates it. And so he's actively working to destroy it. We have to actively, eagerly, full-on effort, without passivity, give every fiber of our being to maintain it. So I want to give some indicators to be just on guard against for us as we see kind of these red lights flashing on the dashboard. Obviously, verse 2 is kind of where you start. Like, let's look where there's a lack of humility or gentleness or patience. We're going to start there in my heart. But I'm going to pop up at a higher level and go, hey, if we start to see this happening in our heart or in our church, here's some warning signs we must look out for. Number 1, disenchantment. So this would be like a loss of eagerness for community. Maybe you've been disappointed and let down over time. And so you've just given up on the vision of it, right? The opposite of eager. You're cold and calloused. Today you just need to ask God to reawaken you, okay? Lord, renew my vigor and my passion. Help me see the design that it is and why it is for my good and why you are worth it. Number 2, distance. So this is like an insulated, self-sufficient approach that yields shallow relationships. If you're the kind of person who keeps people at an arm's length, okay? Maybe you kind of divulge a little bit, but not too much. Not too much to make it uncomfortable. And I certainly don't go asking counsel from other people or sharing sins or bringing them into my life decisions or day-to-day operations, right? There's a safe, insulated distance at a social level. You are functionally alone. Now, it could be because you just don't know how to walk in that kind of community. It could be fear. It could be pride. Whatever it is, Lord, help me see the breakdown there and what's behind those barriers. Number 3, disinterested. This is like a complacency, right? Like where you've taken your foot off the relational gas of knowing people more. Maybe you're content with, I got a couple people, I'm good. And so just the fervor to continue to press relationships deeper is gone. You're not eagerly cultivating unity. You're not playing offense in relationships. Number 4, disgruntled. And yes, by now you can see I can't not use the same letter in all of these. I thought about like throwing in a Q or something just to kind of mix it up, but I think there's something in like the pastor code you have to stay on the letter. So I did. Disgruntled. This is like a low level of unhappiness to where you just kind of tend to be critical. You spot all the faults in everyone else or in all the structures, and they just kind of come out. Everything else or everyone else is the problem. Number 5, disconnected. Oh, this is an obvious one. You're just not present. You're not around, okay? If you're not there, if Sundays are kind of like optional or GCs or when it feels okay, there's kind of a cost-benefit analysis you're constantly running, then you're not going to cultivate unity, right? Because you're not there. I would just say, hey, don't underestimate the bigness of time and of key moments with other people. You might be there 80% of the time, but what you missed in that 20% was really key moments that would have forged a lot of depth. Number 6, disengaged. Like you're there, okay, Tyler, I'm attending, but you're not present. You're distracted, you're checked out. You're not very enthusiastic to be there. There's no eagerness to maintain unity. Number 7, detached. So this is a tendency to kind of form private, separated pockets of community. Now, on some level, this is natural. This is normal, right? So even Jesus shows us a good model of community where he's got the crowd following him, then he's got his 12 disciples, and then he even pulls James, Peter, and John aside for like a pocket of 3 sometimes. That's a good kind of social level for us. We've got a size of a church this big, then we have a gospel community, and maybe even within that, there's a few that we're going to gravitate to really close relationships with. You can't be best friends with everyone. It makes sense. But watch out for creating community with only those you're drawn to while avoiding those you're not. And watch out for creating community outside of the leadership-led structure within the church and replacing that. Like, it's easier to make your own version a lot of times. Totally get it. But that doesn't eagerly maintain unity. Number 8, divergent. Often in our passions, we begin to steer the ideas or visions of community just slightly in degrees, like someone who's rowing real hard just turns the ship slightly. Watch out if that's you. Maybe you held your idea too close, or you're an issue Christian. This particular secondary or tertiary issue becomes so essential. Number 9, desensitized. I just keep coming up with D words. It's crazy, I know. Desensitized. So compassion and empathy are waning. Like, you just don't feel much for people. When they share prayer requests, when they open up about hard things they're going through, you're just kind of flat on the inside. God, help me feel what you feel. Number 10, disregard. This is where you avoid difficult people or uncomfortable interactions. You take the path of least resistance in community. I don't enjoy this, so I'll avoid it, right? Number 11, distrust. There's that subtle lack of trust in others. Often it's leaders, right, or those who are leading something. Maybe they let you down. Maybe we haven't handled something right. And so it's very, very easy to kind of assign motives and kind of slant things in your mind rather than talking about it to the Lord, getting counsel, and then going to them to actually talk about it. That's where unity will be forged. Number 12, defensive. I understand this one really well. You don't respond well to seeing your own faults and weaknesses, but there's a pride in you that makes you combative or makes you shut down. When you feel exposed, and so what that does, it creates tension and makes you unapproachable. This is the opposite of unity. It creates distance. And last, number 13, discord. This is an obvious one. If you consistently find that disagreements or strife follow you, chances are it might be because you are disagreeable, right? You have maybe an argumentative spirit. You like that type of interaction too much. So probably we can all pick out a few of these that apply to us, that could subtly invade our unity. And we need to be on guard for it. Jesus in John 17, his final prayer in the garden before the cross, had one primary focus as he prayed for us. John 17:11, look at it. Holy Father, keep, which is the same word for maintain, by the way. Maintain them in your name, that they may be one even as we are one. And he goes on to repeat that 4 or 5 times, praying for our unity. It's that important. And did you notice his basis for that unity is what? Because we are one. God is one, which is exactly where Paul goes next in verse 4 through 6, reinforcing the imperative with what? The indicative. Here we go. Let's read it. Verse 4 through 6. There is one body, the church, one Spirit, Holy Spirit, indwelling us all, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. That's our one future eternal salvation in heaven together. One Lord, that's Jesus who accomplished the salvation. One faith, that's our confession of beliefs. See, this is really critical. This isn't some bumper sticker, trendy, utopian, universalistic view of unity. Like, let's all just be one. No, we have a common set of beliefs. That was chapters 1 through 3 that bind us together. One faith. One baptism. There's our public profession of following Jesus together. And one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And if there's one Father, then there's one family. 7 ones, like a drumbeat, summarizing the unity of our God and his gospel. Who else can claim that type of unity? No one. Like, this isn't one gym, one sports team, one neighborhood association. This isn't one skin color or one country or one company or one hobby or one fashion style or one last name or one season and age of life or one schooling decision. Like, those are the tribes that our culture prizes, right? And those things pale. They're petty in comparison to what we have in the common bond of Jesus. That you and I look at each other this morning and we go, man, we should be in hell today, but God stepped in. He redeemed us in grace, and now he's saved us into his own family, the church. That's what binds us together, the blood of Jesus. Amen. One God and one gospel, and so we are now on the same team. So let's summarize what we see today. With all that's in you, church, make every effort to preserve what Jesus purchased. I think Jesus must be heartbroken as he looks out on his family and sees fragments or sees cold, lukewarm love towards one another. When he died to make us one, he died so that we could walk in a lowly humility towards one another rather than an inflated pride. He died so that we could walk in a warm, kind gentleness instead of a rough and abrupt inconsideration. He died so we could walk in a long-suffering patience and a compassion towards each other, not short-sighted irritability and indifference. How do we demonstrate the indestructible unity we've seen in the gospel? By loving relationships. Loving, like really gritty, and all the ruggedness of that word, loving one another. That's the remarkable part of the day. I'm so astonished. That's the first place Paul goes. Like, he just lays out the gospel, and then he doesn't go to preaching it. He doesn't go to prayer. He doesn't go to fighting sin or marriage or anything else. He's going to get to those things. The first place he goes to a life worthy of the gospel is you got to love each other. We start there. Because the one who sacrificially loves self-centered people, so that self-centered people could be set free to sacrificially love each other. That's the gospel. So the band comes up and we get ready to respond. I think it's key that we see today, if we're not loving one another in this room, then we're not evidencing the gospel, right? It's what 1 John 3 and 4 say over and over and over. Maybe you're in this room and the kind of unity with Jesus we're describing, you don't have yet. There's never been a moment you put your trust in Jesus as the substitute for your sin, as the only hope for your escape from the punishment that every one of us deserves. Like, you've never done that. And so maybe you've even been around the church for decades, and you're attracted to this unity, and you're socially involved in this community, and yet you're missing the very ingredient that binds you with other believers. Hey, today's the day. You would stop as we sing and call out to Jesus so that you could have that vertical unity that will then create the horizontal unity. For those of us who have trusted Jesus, let's just respond very simply today with a couple quick things. Number one, let's engage deeply in gospel community, right? If you're not in a GC, maybe even you're new to the church, checking it out, hey, check out a gospel community. Jump in and start forging those relationships. If you've been here a while and you're not in one, why? Why not? Are you functionally operating alone? Are you anemic? Spiritually missing those calories? What's keeping you? Is it fear? Is it hurt? Is it pride? Is it that illusion of busyness that we all know? Jesus is worth the calling of community. If you're in a gospel community, then fully engage in it, right? Like, deeply put aside the disconnection and all those D's of division that would keep you from deep relationships. Let's go. Like, it is on you to form those, by the way, right? Community doesn't get DoorDashed to you. No one shows up and serves you a plate of community. Oh, thank you for offering this to me. No, you cultivate it. You take proactive effort. If you wake up in 5 years and you still don't have community, you cannot blame everyone else, right? God's inviting you today into taking steps. And doesn't mean, again, you got to be BFFs with everyone. Just means who can I take a step towards today? What couple of people in this spring do I want to start praying for more, spending time with more? Number 2, let's genuinely repent of the lack of humility and gentleness and patience and resolve to pursue those attitudes with one another. Right? Let's honestly evaluate our hearts. Like, where are some symptoms of me not walking in those attitudes? Where do I have to be honest and say, I don't actually care enough about people? Lord, help me love with your love. Number 3, let's maintain eagerly the unity Jesus purchased. Oh God, give us a we over me mentality. We're not on opposing teams. We are on the same team. You know, at the Well, I feel like on the surface, we're doing really well in terms of unity. Especially I think about the last several years, and man, how many polarizing, crippling, divisive things have occurred, right? Politically, so many socially charged conversations, and then COVID hits and all those mandates. And I talk to other brothers, other pastors, and churches have been just breaking from the inside out as people are at each other. And man, I've just seen you guys, and I brag to other people about it, exhibit over the past several years such a deference to each other, such a laying down of your own preferences. And so I just thank God for that. But where I was pressed this week, pastorally, is going, yeah, but are we subtly letting the closeness of our relationships slide? Maybe on the surface there's no big glaring holes or cracks in our foundation, but are our relationships subtly weakening over time because we're getting complacent? Are we fighting to be closer together? Are we drifting further apart? Are we avoiding hard conversations or difficult people? Are we gradually losing our inclusive hospitality and forming holy huddles? Are we ever so slightly becoming less gentle and less patient because we've been around people long enough, right? And it starts to grate on you. Oh, God, help us. Because we're either every day growing closer together or further apart. There is no neutral, church. May we take a step today towards one another. May the fire of our love for one another grow. Let's eagerly tend those flames. Let's pray together. Jesus, we're struck today by your humble love for us. Laying aside heaven, you came for us. Born as a baby. You're gentle and lowly in heart. We thank you that we can find rest for our souls in you today. You're the most patient, compassionate, approachable man that ever lived. Thank you for your sacrificial love that created unity between us and you. With that love now, I pray, burst out of us. Would the fire of that love be stoked today, that we couldn't help but love one another with that same covenantal love. Jesus, would you fan into flame our humility and our gentleness and our patience, that we would bear with one another in love. Oh, God, help us, because that's not natural in our selfishness. Give us your love for one another, so that the world might see our unity and glorify you. It is for your great name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.